There are more than 100 unique styles of beer, each with their own set of ingredients, process, guidelines, history, and experience. If you're a beer lover, an industry leader, or somewhere in between, a better knowledge of beer style will improve your life and your work.
Welcome to A Sense of Beer Style, essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. I'm Julia Herz.
And I'm Jeremy Storton.
We're advanced Cicerones, beer judges, home brewers, and we're excited to guide you through the vast and wonderful world of beer styles.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining Julia and Jeremy, Sense of Beer Style. And I'm very excited to be in historical beer style land and overview Roggenbier, right? I mean, Jeremy, this is one of those styles that you really don't find a lot. A Roggenbier is a German rye beer, rye as in the ingredient of rye. And it's modeled after the kind of Dunkels or darker Weiss beers from Germany.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the ingredients and the flavor profile. But I love to say that if there's a Roggenbier in the house, at the party, at the festival, wherever, at the brewery, people often whisper to me like, hey, go try that Roggenbier. It's got that kind of cult following, you know?
All the beer nerds like, where is it? I got to try it.
Yeah. So we can't help ourselves. We seek them out. And so that's why it's great that you're listening or watching the show and that you should brew it or be able to serve it and get to know it and buy them when you see them. So I would love, Jeremy, if you'd be willing to take us through this historical beer style that is very rye dominant, more than 50%, and take us through the ingredients.
Yeah. And for anyone listening or watching, if you remembered one thing and one thing only from this, then think of it this. It's not the Dunkel Weizen, but this would be the Dunkel Reisen. That's just a great way to just summarize this in one fell swoop, right? So when we get into the ingredients, what we're really looking for is instead of wheat, we're looking for malted rye, up to 50, maybe even more of a percentage of the grist of the malt bill, right? Otherwise, we're going to have pale malt, can have some wheat malt. We'll likely have some crystal malt because that's where we get that dunkel and that flavor from. But one thing is we're talking about rye. Now let's just here's another little PSA because I love rye bread. But one of the things I love about rye bread is not necessarily the rye, but those little caraway seeds in there that add that wonderful flavor. We'll put those caraway seeds in like Italian sausage, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. But this is not caraway. This is rye. These are two very different things. We often consume them together and therefore confuse them. So let's not confuse them. So there will be no caraway in this beer. And if you are wondering, well, what the heck is the difference? Go to the store, find some caraway seeds at the counter where you can get all the seasonings and just taste them. And now you'll forever know what that flavor is. It's a very prominent flavor. So after that malt, then we're looking for the noble German type hops, and we're looking for a Weizen type of yeast, the one that gives out that beautiful banana and clove flavor. The other thing that they'll do typically with a beer like this, and this should come as no surprise, is they're going to use a decoction mash, which is really going to develop those melanoidins. It's really going to develop that color, and it's going to really develop that mouthfeel and that elegance in it as well. So these are the ingredients and some of the brewing process that I would expect from a Roggenbier. So let's start talking about the beer itself. How about the appearance of it?
So what I love about the appearance is it can help you narrow down because if you were handed a Roggenbier blind, you might be taken aback, meaning blind, you're not aware of what the actual style is. But if you look at it, there's often a copper or orange hue, right? Dark to reddish. That rye will bring the potential for that type of color. So if you see that, it could be an indication. Also, because of the protein and the ingredients, I mean, we are in kind of Weiss beer land. It is going to have some ability for really nice, pillowy, creamy collar of foam. So that's a good thing to pay attention to. And then it should be, persistent and dense as the guidelines call for, thick and rocky, right? So it's looking like it's got robust protein in this style beer. And then it is allowed to have a cloudy or hazy appearance. That's allowable and not a bad thing at all.
Yeah. So when we finally get this beer in front of us and we're done looking at the beer, I want to start smelling it. And so we're going to start sniffing that low to moderate spicy rye, or that spice-like rye, and which is a very kind of like a earthy kind of a aroma. It's not quite buckwheat where it's almost like dry brush type of earthy. It's I mean, rye is very its own thing, so you really have to experience it to really know it. After I smell that spice like rye, I'm looking for that the character from that Weizen yeast, at least a low up to moderate. But we're thinking about the clove phenols and the banana esters. I expect maybe a little bit of that German hop coming through, but it doesn't have to be there. Because remember, this is basically a Weizen beer with rye. So uh, any of those other Weizen beers you've had, it's going to be very, very similar, just with that more rye character. But what does it taste like?
Tastes like you've got rye in it, right? You're looking for that kind of peppery notes, that pumpernickel bread type of flavor, right? You've already gotten past the red hue, so your brain's thinking maybe it is a Roggenbier. So that's kind of what it's going to hit you first is the malt and the fermentables and the barley that's been added. And then you also are looking for a medium to medium low bitterness that helps balance that malt residual sugar. And then the ale yeast components, right? Weiss beer, which this is mimicking, but with rye, that Weiss ale yeast, which is it's kind of its own classification if you really start to dissect it, is really going to throw off that banana, clove, Weizen yeast character. So you're going to get the sense of clove cigarettes, maybe a little bit of vanilla. Think the bananas, isoamyl acetate. You're getting these essence of this Weizen yeast. And that, though, is a little bit of the backdrop to the actual fermentables and the grains. So do keep that in mind. It shouldn't be all about the yeast. It shouldn't be all about the grains. They should absolutely be in balance. And then you're going to get that hops are kind of, it says low to moderate spicy herbal or floral hop flavor. When the guidelines mention those descriptors, spicy, herbal, or floral, they mean German noble hops. And German noble hops, to me, though, I often use and elicit oregano or actually minty, right? So those are going to be low or moderate in the flavor. And you are going to kind of just be looking for all of that package to dance together and play well. And then what rounds out the flavor that you're also noticing is the mouthfeel.
Is the mouthfeel, of course. And this is where it's really going to be very similar to all the Weizen beers that we know and love. Medium to medium full body, high carbonation, just this beautiful creamy texture that's just going to go along with all of that stuff. So that all that stuff is still intuitive. So you can just kind of apply that to your experience. This should be obvious, but let's talk about the style comparison.
And this is definitely a really fun style if you can get them in your cellar to try against comparable styles because you really will dial in. You're looking for that Dunkelsweiss, the dark Weiss beer that it's mimicking. So try it against a Dunkelsweiss, right? But you're going to get the rye when you taste your Roggenbier. We're also looking to try this against American rye beers, right? Those aren't going to have the Weiss beer ale yeast character. So that's removing that component. So I think a little triangle taste of all three of those would be a really, really good way to calibrate on this style.
In the name of science.
That's right.
When we get into our commercial examples, there's really not a lot out there. This is something that is enough of a thing that it ends up in our BJCP guidelines, but not enough of a thing that it's prolific everywhere. So the only example that the guidelines list is the Turn and Taxis Rogen. Hopefully there are some ambitious homebrewers out there, but be warned, because of that rye and the risk of a stuck mash. This is not a beginning level homebrew, but hopefully there's someone out there that's homebrewing this stuff. Maybe there's some commercial brewers that are tackling this. Please let us know. I'd love to find out and share that information. But that's the commercial examples. Let's talk about the vital stats.
Sure. So, as you know, we always follow along on BJCP style
Yep.
guidelines in the order, mostly of what they have in the 2021 guidelines. And so, vital statistics are a key component of your beer studies and appreciation. We like to mention the original gravity, not because you're going to notice that when you're out tasting, because it hasn't turned to a final gravity yet, but it's a good grounding point in terms of memorization on where a beer residual sugar will start. 1046 to 1056, that's very close to so many styles in the guidelines. Nothing too big, and yet it does have some character and gravity. And then the final gravity, once the Vice ale yeast does its thing, will bring you to 1010 to 1014. Not too sweet, not too dry. I love that sweet spot right in there of 1010 to 1014. So the alcohol by volume will be 4.5 to 6%. Again, sessionable, but it's got some weight where you don't want to drink 5 of these in a row, or you better not stand up. And then international bitterness units, 10 to 20, right? 10 is barely discernible. 20 is starting to get noticeable. But depending on how your final gravity is, 1010 to 1014, how sweet is it on that spectrum? Going to 20 could help if it's towards the 1012, 1014 range. And then standard reference method is the common kind of US version for beer color. And that's going to be 14 to 19, right? You're getting close to browns. This is not a black beer. That we talked about the appearance of kind of copperish, reddish. That's what you're looking for. Never to black, and certainly, not nearly as light as amber. So right in that range of 14 to 19 SRM. And
Yeah.
then Jeremy, feel free to do any conversions that you're
Y-
willing to always do.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for those European Brewery Convention folks. I got you. We're at right around 28 to 38. We're still in the same color, but that's just the way that we convert those numbers. And for all you Plato folks, original Plato, we're looking at 11.5 to 14, and final Plato, we're looking right around 2.5 to about 3.5 or so. So do with that with what you will. Glass temp. I'm going Weizenvase on this all day. You could twist my arm and put it in something else. You could put it on a beautiful day like today. You could put it in a red party cup, and I'd still enjoy it. But given the choice, the Weizenvase. Temperature wise, this should be cool but not cold. If for all of you Fahrenheit folks, I'm looking for, I don't know, 42, maybe 44 degrees. I want it cool, but this is actually maybe a little bit warmer to 45 degrees because this has these beautiful darker malt flavors that are going to open up as it warms up, and it's going to have more stories to tell as it warms up. But don't let it overheat, and absolutely do not let it be ice cold. Do not put it in a frosted glass. You will destroy the flavor, and it'll take even longer to warm up. That's my take on it.
So pairings, right? I love the idea of putting this with kind of maybe pork chops and applesauce.
Oh
You
yeah.
you want this with something. I mean, apples are really going to complement. Think of rye. Think of the rye bread without the caraway seed, and sliced apples really comes to mind. I'm thinking melted cheese. It could be really mild Munster. Could go all the way to like totally Havarti is kind of got a little bit of racy note and some dill in there. So I'm thinking melted cheese. I'm thinking apples, and you go all the way to pork chops. If you do carnivore, that side of things would be just fantastic. There'd be lots of synergies. And pork chops aren't an aggressive meat, right? They're almost considered a white meat, more chicken than steak kind of thing. So it would allow the beer to shine. And I think there'd be this nice exchange and dance and interplay between the two.
I think that's an excellent idea. In fact, I'm going to write that down because I want to try that next time I find a Roggenbier. With this, I was really thinking about just the kind of earthy and sweet flavors that are going to kind of like dominate or proliferate through this thing. I was thinking, how nice would it be to have like this a steak with sautéed mushrooms, or maybe a pasta carbonara, and just kind of see how that would play. But I'm looking for some more rustic, earthy flavors from the cheese world. I love your ideas that you mentioned. I'm thinking it may be a fondue. I'm not totally sold that would work because there is some acidity there that may not work with that, but I'm willing to try it to do the research. But I think in classic German style, a kind of like a warmed, sweaty raclette would probably be perfect with this thing.
Oh yeah.
Either way, I'm willing to try and find out for sure.
All you say in the cause of science and sensory, right? Like
Yep.
this is the journey. Pair on, let us know how it goes, and definitely seek these out or brew them. But they're lots of pairing potential because rye is just such a fun ingredient to play with.
Yeah, and it's different and it's unexpected. So that I mean, that alone could be really fun. So with that, hopefully you can find one, taste it, learn it, love it like we do.
Cheers.
Prost.
Thank you for listening to A Sense of Beer Style, the essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. With advanced Cicerones, me, Julia,
And me, Jeremy.
Tune into the next episode as we continue exploring the world of beer styles and what to make of them. We encourage you to listen to the prepisodes to build your foundation and better understand beer styles.
And before the next episode, I'd like to ask you to review the show and let us know what you'd like featured in upcoming episodes. Until next time, here's to you and your sense of beer style. Thank you for listening. Cheers.